Hi, everyone, and welcome back to this episode of Pod Save the Youth. We have a lot to discuss today, including the recent developments in the presidential race, Joe Biden dropping out, Kamala Harris becoming the presumptive Democratic nominee. I'm David.
And I'm Marcus.
Let's get into it. So, last Sunday, Joe Biden made the decision to drop out of the presidential race. This was after the president repeatedly dismissed calls from party leaders, voters, and other officials to drop out after his disastrous debate performance in late June. And also, in recent weeks, Joe Biden and his campaign have conducted private polls in the key swing states that Joe Biden needed to win the election, and they were not good. They were terrible for him. They showed that he pretty much had no path to victory in this election in in the swing states. And this all together, along with the encouragement of a few key people like Barack Obama and Nancy Pelosi, ultimately led Joe Biden to make the decision on Sunday to drop out of the presidential race and endorse his vice president, Kamala Harris. So, Marcus, what do you think of Joe Biden's decision-making process that ultimately led him to drop out in the first place?
Yeah, um, I think he did the right thing, not only for the country, but to pass that torch on to the next generation of leaders and making that choice. I think was really something that we don't really see a lot from politicians these days. Actually, letting go of power and giving it to someone else. I think it was really brave of him to do that, and I'm very proud of him for doing that. But also, he's leaving behind a legacy. He's leaving behind long list of accomplishments, historic accomplishments for working class families. One of the most pro union, one of the first presidents to ever walk a picket line with union workers. I think he really left behind a really big legacy. But also, I think in this moment, we saw young voters being really turned off to show up to the polls this election cycle. With him stepping out and getting Vice President Harrison, young voters are really energized right now to show up and to elect the first Black woman as president and to really show up and defeat Donald Trump again, like we did in 2020. So that's kind of my take on it. I think he did the right thing. And I think this really gives him the history books will really treat him well, and that he really carved the way for some of the most progressive policies in modern times. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree with that. I mean, we know he's been the most progressive president in American history, past, the IRA, the largest climate bill in American history. He signed student loan forgiveness into an executive order. He has worked to, stem the gun violence epidemic that's plaguing American communities and particularly young people across the country. And he's done all of this without getting a lot of credit for it because of his age and his lack of the ability to really drive home that message as a strong communicator and campaigner. So I think that, I had concerns for a while about Joe Biden's ability to win over youth in this media environment, in this electorate right now, going into November. And I think that those those struggles with messaging expanded to the larger electorate after our eyes were kind of opened as a wider public to the state of Joe Biden and his campaigning abilities after that presidential debate. And I think that, that put a lot of pressure on him when voters said in his own party that we don't want him to be our nominee, not because we don't care about him, not because we don't respect his legacy, but because we want to preserve it.
Mm-hmm.
Because we want him
Exactly.
to go down in history as
Mm-hmm.
that most progressive president that we've ever had. I mean, hopefully we have more progressive presidents, but so far. And we want him to be remembered as the person that was not only saying that he wanted to protect democracy, but did the steps that were necessary to protect it, including, as he said in his speech a few days ago, sacrificing personal ambition, which is the hardest thing, as you said, to do in Washington, Marcus. One of the hardest things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So soon after Biden publicly announced that he was leaving the presidential race, he released another statement endorsing Kamala Harris as the party's presumptive nominee. She has since received endorsements from most party officials, including at this point the Obamas, the Clintons, everyone under the sun, pretty much for our party, um, including the people in our party who were pushing Biden to step down and the people who wanted him to stay, notably. She's also received a bunch of support from the voters of the Democratic Party, 90% of which in recent polls have said that they support Joe Biden's decision to step down in the Democratic Party
Hmm.
and support Kamala Harris's candidacy as a result. So, do we agree with the Democratic Party's decision right now in the wake of Joe Biden's endorsement to make Kamala Harris pretty much the presumptive nominee without a real competition at the convention?
We're in a very difficult place and only have 3 months to go till the election. And as much as I would have loved to see the craziness of an open convention played out, I think we're at a point where we need to come together as a party, and we need to already have someone who's well established and well known with the country become the party's nominee and defeat Donald Trump in the general election. I really think that's what's important to us because there's a lot on stake. There's a lot on the line, and there's a lot of issues that we care so much about that we need to get up past these 3 months and win this general election.
Yeah, absolutely. There is very little time. And I think that, we can have conversations about whether Joe Biden made the right decision to step
Mhm,
down the plate in the cycle. Um, and about whether or not he should have dropped out, but whether or not he should have dropped out earlier or not run in the first place.
mhm.
Um, Obviously, aging changes people rapidly and it increases in its pace as you get older. So I don't know what happened there, but I think that it's too late at this point for competition.
Yeah.
Saw that in the fact that Gavin Newsom, Gretchen Whitmer, um, and other Democrats who would be in a position to run if Kamala Harris it was perceived as not a strong candidate or had more time in the race, they endorsed Kamala Harris because I think we all recognize at this point that the most important thing we can do is not repeat the mistake that we made in 2016,
Yep.
not get divided in this moment where our democracy is on the line. Because we understand as a party that our democracy depends on our unity. And I think we've seen a very positive result of that. I think that this environment, I don't know if you feel the same way, Marcus, feels so different from 2016 in the fact that we are we are a party that seems excited for the first
Yeah.
time, really, since the Obama campaign in 2012, right? We are energized around a candidate who is younger, who brings the vigor and
Mhm.
fight to the issues that we care about, right? Abortion rights, gun violence prevention, I know everything. We have a candidate that's able to message and excite us as Democrats about the fight that she is bringing to this political conversation. So I'm super excited, um, and I think that we're excited to be a party that feels like we're one big team again. And and I think that Kamala Harris is a great person to carry that message in November. So in the 24 hours after Biden dropped out and endorsed Kamala Harris, the Harris campaign has raised a large sum of money, raising over $100 million at this point, which was in the 24 hours after Harris became a candidate in this race, was the largest fundraising day in American political history. So there's a lot of
Woo.
excitement from
Yep.
grassroots donors, people who have never donated before, I believe, have donated at this point to Kamala
Yes.
Harris, which is super exciting to see some of the
Mhm.
same kind of energy that contributed to Bernie's rise in the Democratic Party, um, but from people of all different ideologies in the party. Kamala Harris will also inherit the former Biden campaign's current campaign war chest, including campaign funds, staff, and infrastructure, fuel offices, everything. And in terms of messaging, Kamala Harris has leaned into her background for the first time, I feel like, in her entire political career, or at least her career running for president, as a prosecutor who is able to really prosecute the case against running against a convicted felon. The clearest contrast that could possibly be drawn in American politics, right? And in her first campaign speech in Wisconsin, Kamala Harris delivered the message that I feel like is super powerful, that we are not going back. We're not going
Yep.
back to 2020. We're not going back
Nope.
to even the Biden administration. We're not going back to that generation of leaders. We're going forward. And
Hmm.
people have a choice to go forward. So, Marcus, how do you think that Harris should navigate this moment in global politics where a large number of people are upset with incumbent politicians and want change, even though Kamala Harris is sort of a continuation of the Biden administration in the fact that she's VP right now?
Yeah, I think it's like she said, moving forward and selling that vision. I remember seeing her recent ad she released, her first campaign ad, the one Beyonce Freedom song. I mean, that ad, I mean, I haven't felt that much joy about a presidential candidate since Joe Biden did his when he was running against Donald Trump. I haven't felt that much joy in a presidential candidate since he released "The Soul of America," America the Beautiful, actually on election night when he won his presidential election. I haven't felt that much like excitement about a campaign video for a higher office person since that video. And I think that he has to sell a message of we're moving forward and we're not going back. But also, there's a lot of issues that we have to address that are really, really controversial, right? The war in Gaza is still top of mind, especially for young voters. Young voters are going to continue to hold the party accountable and hold Vice President Kamala Harris accountable because we are a generation, very humanitarian, love generation, and we do not like to see innocent people be killed by our taxpayer dollars. And I think that is an issue that I think so far she's doing really good at addressing. And I think that really is also leaning her into young voters because you have to recognize young voters are half of the voting bloc now. And so, right, you need them to show up and you need them to be energized and you need to step into those issues that they really, really are passionate about because that's how you win an election. That's how you win a swing state like Arizona. That's how you win a swing like Pennsylvania and Wisconsin. So, those are states that you really, really need to win those. And young voters at college campuses really, really can deliver those wins for Democrats and for Vice President Harris's campaign. But also, it's like giving voters in the country hope. We haven't had that in so long. I think Biden, like you said, like he did so many amazing things. We see so many projects. Every time I go to Sky Harbor, there's always like this project is funded by President Biden's infrastructure law. But it's like people don't, recognize that. They see it work, but there's always been somebody who can deliver that message. And I
Yeah.
think Kamala Harris is a really good messenger because she was a prosecutor, right? That's the reason why. Um, and I'm really excited. I'm really hopeful, and I'm really just taking a deep breath and taking a sigh of relief as we step forward. And I think a lot of people are taking a sigh of relief, but also getting back up and recognizing that we have a lot of work to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll go back and talk about that ad that you mentioned a minute ago.
Hmm.
When I first watched it, I didn't have the same reaction to you, Marcus. I was like, oh man, I feel like they're not getting at what we need to be talking about right now. I feel like there wasn't enough explicit contrast between, he's a convicted felon. I don't think
Hmm.
they said he's a convicted felon in the ad. And I think after thinking about it a little bit more, after spending a little bit of time considering what the message was in the ad and how I reacted to it, I've come to the conclusion that my brain has been kind of infected by the Biden administration's or the Biden campaign for the past 2 years of running this. I think that I have come to the conclusion that there is no way that Democrats can possibly win an election that's about us, that's about our candidate. Versus their candidate, and we have to make it just like a contrast between a candidate that's unqualified and our candidate who's just kind of the opposite, not that.
Yep,
But I don't think that Kamala Harris, the Harris campaign, has to think about this race the same way. And after watching that ad a second time, I feel like it's exactly the right message. It's a
it
message.
is.
There was so much joy in that ad.
Mm-hmm.
There
Yep.
was you know, obviously like a relatively young and energetic candidate walking onto the stage to Beyonce, uh, and just looking really happy and excited and
Mm-hmm.
talking about that choice between the past and the future. And giving that, iconic Harris line, when we fight, we win.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's exactly the right message to be bringing to our party right now. We were a party that was denied a joy about politics for a really long time. And
Yeah.
and now we're, for the first time in a really long time, again, we are feeling that joy about a candidate that we really passionately believe in and want to work for. It's not any longer a decision, at least for me, between the better of two evils, or something like that. It's it's a choice between someone who is bright and energetic and amazing and historic, and someone who's a convicted felon who is absolutely unqualified to be president and did a terrible job the last time.
I was just thinking about is this line that she said I think it was earlier this year. I can't remember if it was end of last year. I think she was in Flagstaff actually in Arizona. When she came, like she did like a student college tour. And she came down and she gave that speech on the stage where she said, there are times when I can remember the exact line. There are times when your doors are going to be open for you, but there are times your doors are going to be closed. And she said, sometimes you have to kick down the fucking door and make room for yourself in that room. And I think like the fact that that really really relates to young voters and relates to people like us who've always not been welcomed in decision making spaces and spaces of power. But I think it's great to see somebody like that actually be the ticket for the most one of the most influential and powerful offices in the country. And I think that that is something like young voters really relate to, that someone who can relate to them. And I think about that line. I really think that our party is embracing that, and young voters have been wanting to see that from our party for the longest time. Somebody
Yeah,
who's willing to kick down the door to create change and move forward.
absolutely. Um, on a more serious note, I feel like we also have to really make sure, as voters, as people who are organizing in this election, and I hope the Harris campaign, if they somehow hear this, um, we have to be really careful that we don't let Harris fall into the trap of only continuing on the message and on the campaign of the Biden, of Joe Biden. I think that young people want change in this moment. People around the world want change in this moment. We saw that in the UK. We saw that in France. We saw that in,
Mm-hmm.
in the 2022 midterms, right? And we have to be a party right now, and we're uniquely position to be a party right now that is able to present not only a candidate that will deliver change, but a candidate that looks like change, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, Marcus, breaking down the fucking door, right? We
Yep.
want that right now, and we have to make sure that the Harris campaign is delivering that message to young people wherever they go. That this is not the same. This is different. I look different. I sound different. I am different. Uh, and I think that that's a very powerful message for young people. But continue our conversation about her messaging to youth. Biden's age was obviously a big concern for us. I heard that in my focus groups. I heard that
Yep.
I saw that in the polling data we've seen. Um, and now that issue is really a moot point. We also see that Kamala Harris has given the Democrats the ability to create fun and positive social media content
Yep.
that is remaking the meme landscape in this election and energizing young people, and over social media, a very powerful tool. So can the Harris campaign revitalize the excitement of young people through this social media content?
Oh yeah, she's already done it.
I
In the conversation.
was
There's no
hoping
further
you'd say that.
discussion. I definitely think she can. I think she's doing a really good job. And I think whoever is running her PR and communications over there, we need to know them because they are doing a good job. Um, I think she just announced yesterday she's going on TikTok. right?
Yeah,
And it's like,
yeah.
as somebody who's a Gen Zer doesn't even have TikTok, right? To see the vice president going on TikTok.
Either. Yeah.
So it's really great. Like you have to meet young voters where they're at. They shouldn't have to go to you. I think it's one thing our party's always had a hard time understanding. Right, we have to go to young voters, meet them where they're at, not talk down to them, but meet them where they're at. So I think that is something her campaign she's going to be really effective at because she's a really powerful rallier, and she's really good at messaging. So I think we'll see that.
Yeah. I'm also just wondering, I know we mentioned the war in Gaza. Kamala Harris didn't go to Netanyahu's speech in Congress, but she met with him afterwards and then gave an address to the United States public, um, really addressing for the first time, and I would say the administration's response to
Yep.
this war,
Yep.
the actual human suffering
Mm-hmm.
of the people in Gaza. And I think, and she also addressed the student protest, right? The people who have been calling in our generation for change on this issue. And she spoke to our concerns.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, is there room for her to really break through in this environment, through that speech, which I'm sure wasn't watched by too many young people? Is there kind of room for her to separate herself from the Biden administration's policy and move to a more, I guess, empathetic approach?
I think there is. I think I think when we saw Vice President Kamala Harris kind of come out when she came out, what was it? I can't remember if it was April or May when she came out and she said that there has to be a ceasefire, but she said for a temporary ceasefire, not a full on ceasefire. And I think she wanted to say in that moment, I think she wanted to say that she wanted to see a permanent ceasefire in that moment. But because of President Biden's historic relationship with Israel, she had to be more cautious and more
Right.
watered down in her approach. But I think now, I think we're going to see her step into that. I think for her to come out right after she met with him and to um, call that out and this is what young voters have been asking for from this administration. It's what the people of Palestine have been asking for. Just an acknowledgement that our taxpayer dollars are funding genocide in a different country where it's not even affecting us. We're funding that, but it doesn't directly affect us. But it affects Palestine families who are here based in America. It affects Palestine students who came here for college, for work, and so that's how it affects us. And I think this was a when I saw that, it made me really happy because finally somebody is acknowledging that, and the top of the ticket is going to be acknowledging that. And I think that she should continue on that message, continue on it, because it really is going to motivate young voters to show up for her.
Yeah, two things on this. I think it's
Hmm.
interesting how the start of the Harris campaign is also translated, I think, into the start of her messaging as vice president.
Yep.
Kind of interesting too. It's weird that she wasn't really able to deliver her own message as vice president for the past 4 years, but never too late to start on that. Um, I'll say also, I think that, as you said, she did call for a ceasefire, um, at the Edmund Pettus Bridge earlier this year, but that message didn't break through because people were focusing on Biden,
Yep.
and he was our candidate. He was our nominee.
Hmm.
He was at that point the lead messenger for our party, and he wasn't connecting with young people. Now, so many young people in focus groups and polls don't have hardened opinions on Kamala Harris yet.
Yep.
So she has a chance to define herself, her record as vice president, and her administration's policies that are possible future administration's policies, and give voters a chance to judge her separately from Biden. And I think that that's, a big opportunity for her. And obviously, right now, Republicans have been throwing all these crazy
Hmm.
accusations at Kamala Harris, saying she's a DEI candidate and much worse things. Um, just what's your reaction to that?
You know what? We
I
don't
think,
have time for that. We don't got
yeah,
time for that. We got more important
yeah.
things to do. Okay. Like
That's
I don't know
that's what
what.
I say
Yeah.
too. I think that there's this opinion that some people have that she hasn't really earned her spot in the administration, that she was chosen because of her diversity. I don't think that's true. I just
No,
don't think that's true.
she.
She is an eminently qualified person.
Hmm.
She is someone who, if she were, someone of a different background, I think she'd be in the same position, running
Yeah,
for running for president of the United States, and no one would be questioning whether she was qualified to be in that position because it's just assumed that all these white men in government are just gonna, you know,
yeah.
ease their way into positions of power and that they've always earned it, which is probably less likely to be the case if we're speaking honestly.
But also, it's like in 2020, the moment that really made her famous during the 2020 campaign when she's running against Biden is when she called out Biden.
Yeah.
That was the
Yeah.
moment that made her famous, and Biden ended up picking her as vice president. So I think what Biden saw and what they saw is that they're going to hold each other accountable, right? They may not get along, but you want someone who's going to hold somebody accountable in spaces that they're working
Yeah.
together, president, vice president. And I think that's why he picked her because he knew she would hold him accountable. And also because he recognized the country is changing, the country is getting more diverse. People need to be reflective of people in power. That needs to be reflected of it. That's why he picked her. He didn't pick her simply because she was a black woman. He picked her because she was elected 3 times to an office in California, to different offices, senator, attorney general, DA. So that's the reason why. And she overwhelmingly can win an election, and we'll see her win in November.
Sure hope so. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, we'll get it done. So talking about one of the other things that could shake up this race, Harris's selection for vice president.
Ooh.
So far, a number of candidates have emerged as top contenders, including Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear, North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper, Marcus, your senator from Arizona, an astronaut Mark Kelly, Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, and Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg. Marcus, I know we both have our favorites, but who do you think brings the most to the table at this point for Kamala Harris?
Man, I think looking at Josh Shapiro, right, of Pennsylvania, um, as a school board member, with my school board hat on, as a public education advocate, he has been public education organization advocates have already signed on to a letter and sent it to the Harris campaign, calling for him not to be the nominee because of his stance on vouchers, which, for folks who don't know, is very terrible thing that is destroying public education. So he is known to be very, very lenient on that issue, and a lot of public education organizations, which I affiliate myself with, are standing against his nominee. So that's where I stand on him, right? And I think in Pennsylvania, it's a turning bluer state. But also when we think to Arizona, right, my home state, Mark Kelly, I think Mark Kelly be a great pick. I think my top 2 favorites right now that I'm stuck in between tuning is obviously my Senator Kelly, but also Governor Beshear of Kentucky. I think Governor Beshear of Kentucky would be a really, really good candidate because we've seen him message conservative issues that conservatives really, really tackle really effective in Kentucky with abortion access. He ran on that in Kentucky. And so, like, standing against vouchers and standing against those issues, privatization of education in America, which I think is something that she should have a really strong nominee on. But I think Governor Beshear, my personal favorite, Senator Kelly from Arizona. Obviously, if she picks Senator Kelly, we'll be fine because Governor Hobbs will appoint a Democrat to fill his seat for
Right.
the 4 years. And I think there'll be a special election in 26 or 24, 26 or 28, if she picks Senator Kelly. So it'll be safe blue seat somewhat. And then possibly, if there's a special election, we'll see who can possibly win that because we're still not red or we're blue, we're still purple. So yeah, I think that's my personal choices. What about you, David? What do you think?
Yeah, I think Governor Bashir is a strong choice. I have some similar concerns with Josh Shapiro. I think he's a strong messenger, but
Mm-hmm.
I would say that Andy Bashir is an interesting choice because he's younger too. He's able to connect with a lot of people, and I would say both the Midwest and the South. Could help with Georgia, could help with some of the more suburban areas in Arizona. in Nevada, and also brings a lot in the Midwestern region because that's kind of where he's more based. Um, I think that I have similar beliefs to you about Mark Kelly. He's a great guy. He's a great campaigner. I think that I mean, I know he's an astronaut, and that's something that people really admire about him. His his service to our country as a veteran is really admirable as well. And I think that Kamala Harris would be wise to pick someone who has that service background, like Tim Walz, like Mark Kelly, like Pete Buttigieg, because I think that's a valuable experience to have if you're going to be in charge of our country's military. Um,
Yeah.
I think that my personal favorite though is Pete Buttigieg. I personally am, I know Pete. I worked for his campaign in 2019 and 2020, and he is the Democratic Party's by far their strongest messenger on basically every single issue. He
Hmm.
is able to not only communicate a strong message, though, he's able to go onto Fox News, go into the hardest situations to possibly be a Democrat and deliver a strong message. And he's able to deliver that message quite effectively. And I think he's one person who is not really afraid to engage in the cultural fights that Republicans are going to throw at Democrats in this race. He's gay and he is open, about his experience, but he's also able to actively combat the attacks that will be thrown at him from Republicans on that. I know JD Vance has been criticizing him for adopting his children. I can't
Yep.
can't wait to see what he says about that. Like I ultimately would say that any of these candidates are strong choices, and Kamala Harris would be smart to pick any one of them. But if I were to pick someone, I would say a veteran as a background is super important. Someone from key state, Pete's from Michigan slash Indiana, key region, and someone who is able to take the fight to Republicans on their own territory. Super important. That's how I'm making my choice. And I know that all these candidates would be a great choice, but those are my opinions, and those are yours, Marcus.
Well, David, we both of us will be in Chicago, FYI,
Yes.
and
Yes.
we will be
Very
seeing
excited.
whoever the nominee is. We'll be seeing their speech, so we'll find out.
Yeah. 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 I'm very excited about that. I think the mood in our party is so different from when I signed
Hmm.
up to be a delegate or when I ran to be a delegate.
Yep.
Um,
Same here.
it is energetic, it is
Yep.
hopeful, it is engaged. So that brings us to kind of the closing of our conversation today. A new CNN poll, and I know other polls in recent days have shown that Kamala Harris has been making up the margin in this race against Donald Trump. In the last CNN poll of the presidential race last week, before this week, Joe Biden was down 6 points nationally and down in every single swing state. At this point, Kamala Harris was down about 3 points, actually a few days ago, could have gone up between that time and now, and there was about a 3 point margin of error. So within the margin of error and looking strong, only gaining support. This is before she's even gone out to campaign. So how do you feel about these numbers, Marcus?
I feel really good. I think also it shows that we still have a lot of work to do in the next 3 months. These numbers are really good. Gives us a lot of hope as a party, as a country, about stopping Donald Trump from setting foot in the Oval Office again, because that's going to be a nightmare if that happens. So I'm really hopeful for them. But I think also shows that there is still a lot of work to do. Also, there's still a lot of people to bring to the table so that we can also have certain communities, marginalized communities people represent, to get those communities organized and rallied to show up for her.
All right. Well, that brings us to the end of our conversation today. Thank you so much for joining us, Marcus. It was great to talk to you, and I'm really excited about this race. I
I'm
hope
really
you
excited too. Let's do this.